4 years ago, Monitor Group's Ashish Karamchandani began selling the idea of low-cost homes to anyone who would listen. Today, Monitor works with a variety of financiers and developers to turn affordable housing into a sustainable movement. Earlier, I caught up with Karamchandani and began by asking him if he thinks affordable housing as a business is here to stay.
You're right about the question about is this sustainable, because I think there's been a lot of speculation that people were doing a little bit of this. Now that the markets are moving up, they'll move out. What's interesting is we've actually done quite a lot of study in this space, and we recently did a project for the National Housing Bank, and we found over 25 developers in large cities in India like Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, actually constructing housing in this range.
So what are the pieces that are falling together finally now for this to take off?
Couple of things. First of all, the basic economics of this has always worked. Land costs about 200-250 rupees a square foot in FSI format. Construction costs are about 600-800 rupees. Profit margins are 20-25%. So you can sell at about 1200 rupees a square foot. You can make a smaller house for about 3 lakhs. The real innovation here is the business model. Earlier, a builder would buy a big chunk of land, sell a few houses. As soon as that happens, the value of the rest of the land goes up. Then they hoard the land. They don't want to sell it because they're looking at escalation in land prices.
Right.
Frankly, they are land owners and land speculators. They're doing construction only as a side business to add value to the land. This is fundamentally different. The people coming in here buy a smallish chunk of land, well connected by transport. As soon as they get all the permits, they sell the housing. The customer gives a down payment of 20%, which pretty much covers their cost of land. As you're constructing, the bank loan is financing the house. Therefore, while their margins are not high, their returns on the amount of money they've put in, their IRR, is extremely high.
Right.
It's in the 40-50% range.
But do you think there might be a time when these developers also yield to the temptation of hoarding land? Do you see that happening in this low-income housing?
There certainly will be some of them will do it. The beauty is we are getting some new players into this market. These guys think with a manufacturing mindset. They don't think like the old developers. In fact, the whole game is construct housing fast, get rid of land, buy more land, but keep producing it almost like a factory production. So they're going to be focused on this because they see the size of this market. This is a 1100,000 crore market today, $200 billion. Think of it, Coca-Cola is 5-6,000 crores.
Right.
We're talking of something 200 times the size of the soft drink market in India.
Right.
20 times the size of the microfinance market.
Right.
And people are smart. They know where the big volumes are. And so they will stay there.
Now the other interesting thing about low-income housing is that the customer base that these developers are looking at is completely different from what your mainstream developers have been looking at so far. Now we're talking about people who are working in the unorganized sector who probably don't have stability of job or probably no regular paycheck. So how are financiers who are putting money into, behind these people managing the risk of default?
You're absolutely right about the fact that they don't have formal paychecks. So they actually get the money. In fact, it's often very regular. It's quite robust. But they're often informal sector, at least in the sense that they don't have documentation. And that's what's interesting. We have a whole new breed of people coming in to finance these guys. These are new people, innovative, creative ideas. Usually there are two reasons why people default: lack of ability to pay and lack of willingness to pay. In this case, you don't have to worry about willingness. It's only ability. So if you can judge the income and the steadiness, you're done.
So in some sense, it's like microfinance.
In some senses, it is like microfinance in the sense that there's a huge demand for it. But in some senses, it is almost microfinance plus. Because unlike microfinance, where at the end of the day, you don't have security, here you have a house.
Right.
Also, as I said, everybody, the last thing they want to give up in their lives is their house.
Right.
And the demand is so huge right now that most people are also willing to give quite a large down payment. So that just increases the security of the whole asset that is there.
Now, obviously, the entire ecosystem around low-income housing is just evolving. What kind of regulatory changes do we need to accelerate this whole movement of low-cost housing? For example, FSI could be one, creation of infrastructure could be another one.
All the things you're talking about. So for example, FSI is an interesting one. Giving very high FSI does not help. Because a lot of this housing is 3-story, 4-story housing. When you're trying to keep the price of housing down, you don't want lifts. It's also increases the maintenance costs. So 3-story, 4-story housing is good. So very high FSI is actually not good. But single window clearances, faster. One of the biggest things all the developers complain to us about is the amount of time it takes to get the permits. The other thing, for example, is on the financing side. Right now, banks have no incentive to lend to these people. Housing loan below 20 lakhs counts as priority sector. If you drop that limit to 5 lakhs, you will be getting banks more and more incentive to actually provide loans to these. So there's a lot the government can do.
Right.
In the long term, there's the issue of land, making land more affordable. Huge areas where the government can actually work.
A lot of these projects are actually come up in the outskirts of the city. For example, it's obviously you can't buy land bang in the middle of the city. So these are coming, let's say, 50, 60 kilometers out of the big cities. So how much of your physical and social infrastructure is already built in these areas, or is that going to be a challenge for developers as well?
That's an interesting question. You're absolutely right. It is in the outskirts of the cities. In a city like Bombay, it's 50, 60 kilometers because of the train line. In a city like Ahmedabad, it is 15 kilometers. The fundamental thing is it's got to be connected by public transport, and there has to be some social infrastructure. These people will not move into a place unless there is a school for their children. Luckily for us in this country, there are quite a few places like that which are already there, where the basic infrastructure is there, connectivity is there, and land is still reasonable.
If you take a city like Bombay and if you look at a slum like Dharavi, it's often said that it's going to be nearly impossible to pull these people out of Dharavi because it's so convenient for them. They're probably 10 minutes away from their work, even if it means living in squalor. People will continue to do that. What does your experience suggest?
It's interesting because when we started this journey 4 years ago, when there was none of this housing, when we felt it was going to be actually useful, a lot of the experts, especially those who work in slums, told us exactly the story. They live in communities, they're happy with the friends they have. When we talk to the customers, it was interesting. A lot of the people who live in that housing actually rent that housing. And when you talk to them about problems, their rent keeps going up year after year. Every 2-3 years, the landlord is throwing them out. They anyway have to move. And then when you compound it with the social issues, the number of people who've told us, first of all, very often they don't have a toilet in their house. It's outside. And the number of people who told us that if my wife or my daughter has to go to the toilet, I have to go to the toilet with them at night. It's not safe. There's a whole aspect of quality of life when they move into a place of their own. And what's interesting is a lot of these people, the wives actually do not work. When you're looking at people earning 8,000, 10,000, it's amazing how many of them are single wage earners.
Right.
So they don't mind going a little further away because the husband can work and he'll have to commute, but the rest of the family has a good quality of life. And as they keep telling us, it's every man's dream to own his house.
That's true.
It's the ultimate asset that you can give them.
Exactly. It's a tragic truth about our cities that nearly half the population actually lives in slums. So what is it going to take to pull these people out of these places and put them in low-income housing, which is possibly, gives them some amount of security and respectability?
I think this is again where it's going to be not one answer for all. So when we say people live in slums, there's a wide variety of people who live in slums. There's some very, very poor people who live in shanties, on garbage dumps. There's going to have to be some kind of government support for them. They can't stand on their own feet. But when you look at people who are earning 7,000, 8,000 today, or living in slums like in a city like Bombay, they can actually afford it. And that's where I see the market actually working. And as I was saying earlier, the size of the market, we're talking of something which is 1,100,000 crores. That means a company can be a 5,000 crore company and have less than 1% market share. And there are a lot of smart operators in India, entrepreneurs, business houses, who are seeing this economic opportunity and will come into it. So I see some level of the market itself moving in because of the economic opportunity.
Finally, Ashish, there are nearly 600 million Indians who make less than $1.5 a day. Now, when will their dreams of owning a house come true? Will it ever become true? And if yes, what is going to make it happen?
I think again, that's like everything else, a nuanced question. A lot of them live in rural India. The cost of a house is much less. Frankly, unfortunately, the earning power is also much less. And again, there are government schemes like the Indira Awas Yojana, which are designed to help them. Some of them don't work efficiently. But I think over time, these things actually improve. So I'm far more optimistic about it.
Okay.
And we are in a country where at least overall things are going well. So I think there is hope for people to have their own house.
Well, on that note, we wrap up this edition of ET Insight. We'll be back next week, but until then, don't forget to write in with your feedback and suggestions. Thanks so much for watching.